It now being 6:08, I'd like to get the meeting started. First, I want to thank everyone who's taken the time to come out and meet with us, and I'm going to ask for your indulgence because I just can't stand. I'm going to have to sit. The reason we're having this meeting is to make people aware of our current circumstances, what our budget picture looks like, and what our future plans are. So welcome to our pre-town meeting presentation. I'd like to start by stating to those of you who may not know that last Tuesday, 2 Tuesdays ago, the Board of Selectmen voted to present an operating budget that includes contributions from free cash to pay for capital payments required due to previous commitments and to provide a budget that reflects reductions in most departments and a 6.5% increase to the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District. Now, the district started out with a 16.4%. After many discussions, the request was reduced. And the most recent vote by the school committee was 12.5%. Unfortunately, as we look at our ability to meet those needs, we come up short. We have currently been paying a bond that was used to build the police station, make approximately $3 million in repairs to this building, and approximately $100 and some odd thousand to the fire station. That was originally a $10 million bond. We have been paying it for 8 years, and we just recently refinanced that bond. By doing so, we are reducing the debt service by, over the next 10 years, $400,000, appreciably reduced. However, that bond is in the levy limit. That means it's within what we have an ability to tax. Typically, building projects are done through a debt exclusion because those type of expenditures are large, long-term, and not considered part of the operating budgets that most towns have. Part of our issue, of course, is we have a significant number of capital requests, and we don't have a plan that effectively addresses and prioritizes those capital needs in a way that allows us to plan ahead. In order to do that, we reached out to the Collins Center, part of UMass Boston, to assist us in studying all of our capital needs, our past appropriations, and our future needs, to put together a plan that will effectively manage how we address needs in the future. When that study is complete, which I hope to have before the end of the fiscal year, we will begin developing a more planned out approach to our capital and operating budgets. The plan will include a number of things. It will include a Debt exclusion, which we're asking for in our May 18th election, and it will include a override, a levy limit increase beyond Proposition 2.5 in the fall. When I go through these numbers, I think it'll be easier to see why that's necessary. I know this is hard to see. This is all on our website. Looking back from 2019 to 2015, I collected data on our budgets, our operating budgets, and the graph shows you the direction of that budget. In 2015, it was $29,419,000. In 2019, it's $36,743,000. Part of our spending includes capital operations. In 2015, our capital expenditures were $1,311,000. By 2019, they were $5,578,000. And these capital expenditures are coming from a number of places. The largest single capital expenditure group is the Sewer and Water Department of the DPW. That operation is operated as an enterprise. That means it's basically a separate company. They take in their own revenue from ratepayers for sewer and water, and then they pay all of their expenses out of that same account. Whatever remains becomes part of their retained earnings, which is funds that pay for their capital needs. Those needs are also included in their rate plan to make sure that each year they're raising enough money to cover those costs. While we are doing that in the enterprise, we are not doing that in the general fund. So when you put all of this together in 5 years, starting in 2015, the combination of general expenses and capital expenses has gone from $30,730,000 to $35,500,000. Bear in mind, $3 million of that was in the last year based on borrowing, or the last 2 years based on borrowing that we did within the sewer and water enterprise budget to make desperately needed capital improvements. And while we did raise that money, it doesn't help us at all on the operating side because those funds can only be used for sewer and water operations. So where are we today? This is a calculation of what funds are available for our coming year operation. We start with a tax levy, and that's basically all of the real estate taxes and personal property taxes that the town assesses, and that's $26,661,000. We then have local receipts, and those local receipts include excise tax that you pay each year on your vehicles, fees that are collected by the building department and by other departments that issue licenses and permits, interest that's collected when tax bills are paid late, and we also have an ambulance account. The fire department operates an emergency medical service, and that service will this year generate approximately $860,000. Traditionally, those funds are used to pay for costs associated with operating the fire department. $518,000 of it goes to their budget for personnel, for firefighters, for clerical assistants. It pays for the cost of running the ambulance service. It pays for a number of things. You'll see it when you look at our actual budget on the web because it's spelled out there. But part of that $880,000 helps to reduce what we need to raise in taxes in our general budget. That number is $518,000. We also receive state aid. It's currently pegged at $2,580,000. I just received a update from the governor's office the other day. It's, I'm trying to remember, approximately, I think it may be about 40,000 more, but that's not final. When we get money from the state, it's through an appropriation process once they set their budget. And before they do that, there are 3 different budgets presented. There's the governor's budget, then the Ways and Means budget, and then they go into a committee that hashes out their differences and comes out with a final budget. So using $2.6 million is probably a safe bet for us. So when you add that up, that's $33,909,000. From that, we have to make allowances for taxes that aren't collected. They're abated because the taxpayer is eligible for an elderly or need abatement. It may be an excise tax bill where somebody has sold their car or traded in a car, and we bill them for both, and they come back and get an assessment. It's commercial properties that question whether they're overvalued, and that is in itself a fairly significant process. But at the end of the line, we have to have a fund from which to pay those abatements because they've already been counted as income. Then everybody's favorite, snow and ice. We appropriate $120,000 a year. Some years, maybe 1 in 7, we wind up spending around that much. Most of the years we wind up spending more. If we do spend more, the difference can be raised either in our budget appropriation or by adding it to the recap sheet, the calculation that tells us how much we have to raise in taxes for the following year. And then we have debts that we've committed to. We have the high school debt, which is $451,000. I'm rounding, $451,000. We have $41,000, which is part of our last payment for a bond that we took out in 1998 to do some building repairs. The current year's debt service for the bond we were talking about with the police station is $687,000. We purchased a sidewalk plow 2 years ago. We financed it over 4 years, and the third payment in fiscal 2020 will be $42,000. We have a small balance coming out of the levy for the third payment of a cruiser that was financed through a lease purchase arrangement. When we buy vehicles, typically we pay for them over 3 years. We take out what's generally a commercial lease. Depending on the rate environment, it's either going to be a lease or it's going to be borrowed from the municipal sector. The rates are typically around 3%, so we finance them over 3 years. Our program was to buy 2 vehicles a year because they wear out between 3 and 4 years. You've got all your life out of a police vehicle. Unfortunately, that's one of the things we're going to be talking about when I get to the end of this program. So totally, we need to raise $34,361,000. Now, where is it coming from? It's coming from our levy, and it's coming from free cash and net appropriations. If we vote the budget that's been presented or proposed by the Board of Selectmen, when we finish town meeting, we will have $346,700 remaining in free cash and $179,000 in capital stabilization. We have not planned to use any of that capital stabilization in this year's budget. So the net funds after meeting will be $525,000. Now, what I tried to do here, and I know it's hard to see, is present an overall budget totaling different segments. So the first series of numbers represent selectmen, finance committee, accountant, audit, assessors, treasurer collector, law account, technology, town clerk, operations, registrars, and boards, and maintenance to the town. Also includes town reports and mailing and duplicating, as well as the cost of providing telephone service to all of the buildings. The total number that we're requesting for fiscal 2020, which is our meeting on May 6th, is $2,098,000. That's $4,000 more than last year. When we get into the second part of the budget, public safety and inspectional services, we're requesting $6,889,000, which is $167,000 less than last year. The other unclassified budgets total up to about $4 million, but the biggest numbers in the budget right now are the school budget requests. The budget that we prepared provides $14,570,000 to Whitman Hanson, $1,948,000 to South Shore and Norfolk Agricultural. So the total budget for education this year, based on the selectmen's budget, is $16,518,543. That is a $928,000 increase over last year. Public Works, $2 million. It's an $80,000 increase. All of it is in trash, the cost of hauling trash and disposing of trash. When you get to the bottom line, the total budget that we're requesting within the levy is $33,129,808. That is an increase over last year of $816,000. Bear in mind where each of those increases came from. Then we have a separate budget for sewer and water. We project our revenues for sewer and water to be $4,885,000. We project our expenses to be $4,852,000. The total operating budget for the town, including the enterprise, will be $38,015,000, which is an increase of $1,179,000 over last year. Now, a big part of our budgets is personnel costs. So if you look at what we've estimated in our 2020 budget, we expect that the personnel costs for the town, excluding the enterprise, will be $6,380,000. And the enterprise fund budget for personnel will be $643,000. Now, we've talked a lot about money and where it's going. I also mentioned that we have some issues with capital expenditures. For this year, the capital inside the budget within the levy is $461,980 out of our tax dollars. Then, using other funds, which include free cash, $902,800, and contributing to those capital costs are $100,000 out of ambulance funds for the cost of paying that final debt on the town hall, $40,000 for the 35 payments for 2016 ambulance. The fifth of 7 payments for a pumping engine, $71,000. Purchase of protective equipment for firefighters, $42,000, and $85,000 to complete the upgrade to the radio system for the police and fire department, the public safety radio network. So the ambulance fund will contribute $337,000 of that money we just talked about. Also, in the special town meeting, there'll be appropriations, and these are generally appropriations we weren't aware of or prepared for when we started the budget process. That'll include $11,000 for a shortfall in the salary budget at the DPW. And then there are enterprise-related capital purchases in the amount of $963,000. Again, those are purchases of equipment or services for the Sewer Enterprise Fund. They are fully supported by the Sewer Enterprise Fund. They are not funded through your tax bill. They are funded through your user fees for sewer and water, but they're not funded through the tax bill. When all is said and done, the total capital that's being requested in this warrant is $3,197,000. Unfortunately, we don't have that money. So when we start town meeting, I am recommending that we stop working the warrant at Article 29, because that's where the additional capital coming out of the tax rate is. And then we adjourn till after the town election. Because again, what we're asking the town to do is to take that debt service for the police station town hall out of the levy and put it in a debt exclusion. That will free up capital to enable us to address some of these needs. And the needs include vehicles for the DPW, road repairs, safety updates for school buildings, both at the town level and at the regional level. Some needed repairs, gym floor repairs, installation of a handicap ramp at the high school, fire lane repairs, rooftop units on the high school, lighting needs on the safety lane that goes around the building at the high school. They're requesting 2 vehicles, and all of these high school debt requests or payment requests are split between Whitman and Hanson. And then we have $125,000 for road repairs and $134,500 for track repairs. Those facilities are very expensive to maintain. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion about it at the town meeting. So what I've said in essence is we need to raise more money, which means we need to reach out to you, the taxpayers, to fund those ongoing operations. Now, I've heard a lot from people who feel that our taxes are too high, our tax rate is too high, that they're not getting value out of the community. So what I did earlier today is I pulled up 27 towns that generally surround Whitman. None of them is more than 25 minutes away. Looking at those towns, our tax rate at 1538 is 24th out of 27 communities. There are 23 communities that have a higher tax rate, and there are only 3 that have a lower one. And interestingly enough, the 3 lower ones are Middleborough, Lakeville, and Brockton. Looking at it another way, how much comes out of our pocket to pay for taxes? Well, we did that too. There are 17 communities that have a higher tax bill than Whitman. So when you look at these numbers, what you really see is a community with needs that haven't been fully met in the past. Sure, we've done some good things. We've built a new high school in 2005, which is a phenomenal accomplishment. We built a new police station in 2010. We did significant renovations to this 111-year-old town hall, which we still occupy and fully use. But along the way, we try to manage by keeping taxes low. And what's happened is we've reached a point where we can't do that anymore and still deliver the services that people have come to expect. If you need medical care, you want to be able to pick up the phone, call, get an ambulance to your house. If you have an issue that is public safety related, you want to be able to call the police department and have someone come out and see you. Those are the very visible services. What you typically don't see are the services that we offer directly to townspeople. And I think the biggest one in the group right now is schools. We just assume that we can pack our kids off, send them to the Conley School, send them to the middle school, send them to the DeVal, and they're going to be educated and they're going to take care of them because that's their job. But that job comes at a cost. And right now, we're not sufficiently supporting that cost. We know they need more. But then you stand there with the scales of balance. On the one hand, here's the need. On the other hand, here's the funds. So you run a town the way you run a household. You prioritize your needs and you put the money where it can do the most good. And we try to do that. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work because someone goes without need. Now, one of the points that Dr. Kowalski made in our meeting, 2 weeks ago, or a week and a couple of days ago, is that we have made a budget recommendation that is less than what Whitman Hanson is asking for, but it's the only budget in the group that's getting an increase. And that's a pretty good argument. Hey, everybody else has reduced their requests, has reduced their budgets, in many cases lower than it was in 2019. And the school district has to deal with rising costs just as we do. And some of those costs are uncontrollable. Health insurance. Health insurance is a huge number for us, and it's significantly more costly for Whitman Hanson. Retirement is a killer. We belong to the Plymouth County Retirement Association and all of our retirees place their payroll deductions to the Plymouth County Retirement Fund. Yet, the amount that we're collecting isn't always enough to cover the future cost. So right now, we're playing catch-up. At Plymouth County, we will be fully funded. We'll have 100% of the money we need to ensure that all people eligible for a pension will receive their money in 2029. So for the last few years and for the next several years, we're paying a premium for that. We're paying additional money to catch up. Another term you may have heard, OPEB, other post-employment benefits. We're required by law to provide health insurance. And we're pretty much limited as to what we can pass on to the employee. So over time, we have accrued a $12 million shortfall in that account. 3 years ago, we made a commitment to use $140,000 a year out of meal tax to pay toward that deficiency. It's a long way from catching up, but believe it or not, we're way ahead of at least 100 other communities that haven't even started to accrue for that yet. So those are all things we have to look at when we plan our budget and we calculate our needs. The biggest single need that we have right now is to raise enough money to provide adequate funding for the school district and for all of the other departments in our town. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is to provide a budget plan that includes a significant increase in taxes. There'll be more of that to come. We're hoping to do that in the fall, and our ability to present that information to you and justify it will be worked out as we complete our plan for capital analysis and for a comprehensive budget. So you'll be hearing more about that. Our recommendation as it sits today is to move forward with town meeting based on the budget that was presented a week and a half ago. And again, it's on our website. If you go to whitman-ma.gov, click on the point to the upper banner and go to the section that says Town Administrator, you'll find a whole section of reports which reflect what I showed you here. There'll be a warrant for all the articles that we'll be asking to act on at town meeting. There'll be a spreadsheet showing you all of the budget lines, each line of the budget, what's requested. Over the next couple of weeks, the Finance Committee will be making their recommendations, and then those recommendations will be added to that budget, so that by the time you come here to town meeting, you should be able to have a pretty good idea of what we're requesting, of where we agree and where we don't agree. And that's where the discussions occur at town meeting. Because once the budget's presented, we will present you with the Finance Committee's recommendation for a budget. It may or may not match the budget that the individual departments are requesting. If it doesn't, that's where the discussion starts. Or if a voter simply wants to question a number, regardless of whether we agree on it or not. So this is all interactive, and it's all in your hands. We have an open town meeting. Every voter in Whitman can attend. Every voter in Whitman can participate. We've been struggling some years just to get 150 voters to start our town meeting. And ironically, our quorum for an annual town meeting is only 50 voters. 50 voters can decide how to spend $43 million. But if it's in a special town meeting where extra requests are, then it requires 150 voters. So think of it that way. 1.4% of the voting population in Whitman can make all of those decisions. So when you look at our community, when you look at what we have, when you look at what we don't have, what we need, and what we ask for, it's all laid out on the table on May 6th. So please, plan on being here. Plan on participating. Every vote counts. Is there anyone who'd like to make some comments? Rick, I thought you wanted to say something. So Rick Anderson is the chairman of a finance committee. He's going to give us a few encouraging words.
Thank you, Frank. First of all, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you all for coming, because really this is a very important part of our budget process. We, as a finance committee and the Board of Selectmen, have been working for more than a year on this budget. So Frank has outlined some numbers. The Finance Committee is still working on Article 2. They're still working on budget recommendations that are similar to the numbers that you see tonight, but just realize that the process continues right up to town meeting. So again, I'm not going to take a lot of time. We appreciate very much your attendance here tonight, and the fact that you're here to get more informed makes our job much easier. Thank you.
I notice we have some folks from the school district here. Jeff, would you care to say a few words?
Good evening, folks. Thank you for coming out and showing your support for us as a regional school district and for your town. I didn't prepare any remarks tonight. I was waiting for just going to sit in my little corner over there and answer some questions. But I just want to diffuse some of the angst, I think, in the room that the school budget is running and running and running. Part of our issue is, and I hate to blame the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but I'm going to throw them under the bus right now. We are bound by law to fund things that the Commonwealth says we need to fund and we're supposed to get reimbursed for. Those are our unfunded and underfunded mandates. And this year in particular, we have to fund over $8 million in underfunded and unfunded mandates. We recover $3 million of that, we're out $5 million. If I were to just say, hey, Commonwealth of Massachusetts, fund us, we wouldn't have an issue with budget, and we would probably be asking for a 0% increase in our assessment. That's not the case. I appreciate what Mr. Lynam said as far as where we are with insurances, and we are looking actively in our next contract to see if we can do some things around insurances along with the town of Whitman and the town of Hanson. But the killer for my budget this year right now, and I say mine, it's at the regional school district, is special education costs, and that falls into that underfunded and unfunded mandates. This year in particular, my budget went up close to $300,000 in transportation. And for those of you that don't know this special education piece, by law, we're required to service students under IDEA and under students who have an IEP. And some of those students can't be serviced in our buildings. Some of those students have to go to schools outside of our district, either to collaborative schools, to private schools, or even sometimes to residential schools. There are students within your community who we pay for top dollar who do not live at home because of their illness, because of their behaviors, because of something that's out of their control. So we have to pay for that for those students to go. We're up over $1 million in out-of-district placements this year. Our attorneys 5 years ago said those costs are going to be coming, and she was absolutely 100% right. Those are costs that we are now fighting with the legislature to say, hey, look, can you give us some reimbursement for that? They do provide some reimbursement for out-of-districts, but not enough, and they provide zero for transportation. And just to give you a simple number on transportation, I have a student that's going to the Compass School in Dorchester that is a locked facility, and the company wanted to charge us $450 a day round trip per transportation. That's 180 days. That's what we have to deal with sometimes, and those things are non-negotiable. So when we ask for some funds, I understand the plight of Whitman. We're trying to work actively through our school committee with the selectmen and the FinCom have been very transparent and very open to us working. But those are some of our costs. We do have employee costs, percentage raises, contractual raises with our bus companies and our cleaning company. Those costs are fixed within the contracts themselves. But the cost that is very difficult for me as a first-year superintendent to wrap my head around is the underfunded and unfunded mandates that we're actively working for. So it's not a money grab from the schools. I wish there was a big treasure chest at the back of the high school where the generators are. There is not. If you talk to the good folks that serve on our school committee, they will tell you that the budget process for us begins in October, and we've been working with the FinComs and selectmen since then to give them as much headway in our budget where we can cut back. There is some news, and I've gotten myself off of Whitman Pride because it's not good for my health, but we did pink slip 62 folks, non-professional status teachers last Thursday and Friday. My assistant superintendent, who's a Whitman Town resident, and I personally gave those out. That does not mean we're losing 62 positions. Right now, if the assessment comes out at 7.5% from both towns, we're going to lose 23 positions. We are going to lose 23 positions. That's not 62 pink slips, and those will be absorbed through non-professional status teachers, through resignations and retirements. So there will be some folks that lose their positions, that lose their jobs. That will increase class size in different areas. That will cut foreign language, and I know there was a comment about foreign language. What we have done in both communities as far as middle school foreign language is not equitable. And I think if we look at an override in the future for full day K and for the right way to do foreign language in our communities, it's the better way to go. I appreciate what Mr. Lynam said about our budget and putting things forward and looking where the school's needs are. Currently, we're 7th from the bottom in per pupil expenditures in the Whitman-Hanson community in our schools. 7th from the bottom out of 352 communities, give or take. I'm not really sure, but it's 350. We're 7th from the bottom. We crept up a little bit, and we're going back down. So any support that the communities can give us, I appreciate. I know the students appreciate it. We still put out a very good product, pre-K to 12. We still have students going to some of the finest schools in the country. We still have students going out into the service, and we have students going out into the working world, and that's the goal of our school system. So if you have further questions, I have members of the school committee over there, Assistant Superintendent Farrell, myself are willing to answer questions. Call me on my direct line. Call Michelle Lindberg, the secretary. I'm willing to sit down and have a cup of coffee with you and explain our budget process and what we do anytime, Monday through Friday, or even weekends and vacations. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Lynam.
Thank you, Jeff. This is intended to be an interactive, open process. We have department managers from all of the departments in town kind of surrounding you, and they're not there for any other reason than to be available to answer any questions or issues you may have. Is there any other department that wishes to speak before I open it up to Q&A? Okay. Now, I welcome any questions you may have that we can answer. Sir.
Yeah, a quick question. You're proposing 4 lines. The first one's going to be capital, which will be in the spring election, I believe.
Correct.
The second one is going to be an operating account,
Correct.
and that will be sometime in the fall.
That's what we're shooting for.
Now, when you pass your budget at this annual town meeting, is the budget's going to be passed on the budget? It is going to be representative with or without that override? And the reason I'm asking that question is if it's based on the override, and then the override doesn't pass, are we going to have to lay off more people in October than we would now?
That's a great question, and the answer is it is based on what we have today. When I went through that analysis, if we do what we presented, we will have spent all but $525,000 of what the town has in available funds for FY20. However, we leave $900,000 in capital requests that are unaddressed. I'm not suggesting that we ultimately will approve all 900 of that. There may be a couple of requests that we're going to look at and say, let's put this in the queue. We have other priorities that are greater. But in order to do that, we need cash. And right now, the cash we would be putting toward that is going toward the bond payment. So if the debt exclusion, which will add 45 cents to the tax rate, is passed, we will then have funds to come back and address those other needs. The larger needs are all going to be dependent on how responsive our community is to raising the levy limit, because that's our future plans. We're just hobbling by. We squeaked by last year by using capital stabilization to pay for the debt that's in the levy limit. Not what we wanted to do, what we needed to do to make that budget work. We can't do it again for two reasons. One, we shouldn't. Two, it's not there. What we need to do is get on even keel with revenues and expenses. We have looked at expenses. We've identified where we could reduce them. Where we go from there depends on what the townspeople want us to do. So the debt exclusion that we're asking for on May 18th is really important, because that'll determine whether we can take those plans that are requested off the table and fund them. If they're not funded, then there's a really strong message there. And then we will present a long-term budget plan that will identify how funds will be used in the future if we're successful in raising the levy limit through an override in the fall. Ma'am?
I came this late, so I'm sorry if you already went over this. But can you explain what a debt exclusion is?
Yes. Communities can pay for things three ways. So I'll give you one example. 3 or 4 years ago, there was a need to upgrade computer facilities at the district. Our share was $837,000. We chose to do what's called the capital exclusion. It's a one-time increase in the tax rate, and all of that money goes to pay for that capital. So that's one way to do it. It's one time, you do it on one tax bill and you're done. Then you have long-term projects that need to be funded. When you buy a house, you take a mortgage because you just can't come up with all the money to buy it up front. Bonding is the same thing for towns. When we want to build a building or do substantial renovations, we can't take that out of the general fund because it isn't there. We don't tax for that. So we introduce what's called a debt exclusion. That's an authorization to borrow money and to pay it back over X number of years. And as we make the payments, we do fixed principal borrowing. So each year, the payment goes down. As the payment goes down, the authorization to tax you goes down with it. So by the end of the debt term, the debt's paid and the tax is gone. You're no longer paying it. Then the third item is a levy increase, a Prop 2.5 override. That is a permanent increase in the tax value. When we set our budget each year, under Proposition 2.5, we can take whatever taxes were billed last year and add 2.5% of it. So it's not 2.5% of your value, it's 2.5% of whatever we did last year. So it grows each year by that number. In order to go beyond that 2.5%, we have to get a voter authorized override. So for argument's sake, if the levy limit today is $30 million, next year we can go up $750,000 under 2.5. If we wanted to go to 32 million, we would have to go to the voters and request that a election be held to vote on our ability to add that $2 million to the tax rate. That's the only way it can happen. And the final limit of 2.5 is no town can ever charge more than 2.5 of its total value. So that happens in depressed communities where they're struggling. There were 2 towns in Massachusetts 2 years ago that hit their levy ceiling. Once you hit the ceiling, you can't do anything. You just can't raise any more money. That's it. That's the absolute limit. So we're nowhere near that. We're at least 16 million away from that. But we are in need of an increase in our levy. Sir, you had another question.
If you're going for a levy override in the fall, approximately how much do you think it will be? I know it's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress, and the numbers that we were looking at are somewhere between 2 and 2.5 million.
And what would that be on the tax rate?
At 2.5, it'd be $1.90. I have a calculation worksheet that I will be putting on the website that will enable people to, as long as you have Excel or a comparable program, to plug in your information, see exactly how it affects you.
So when you say $1 something, how many hundreds of dollars is that?
Well, if it's $1.90 and the house is worth $300,000, it's $570 a year.
But if you already, your house is worth $300,000, you already paid close to that, you're gonna see a slight increase. Or a big increase.
Oh, if you're paying at $300,000, you're going to see a $570 increase at 2.5 million.
So $570, so $100 person, you're gonna see like $50 a month.
Yes.
Okay, and that would be equivalent, I think, because since we're on the expert, 2 dinners for one person at Whitman's.
Well, a lot of years ago,
And this is what I was told, and I am on Whitman Care for Connecticut, whatever it is, and I am from New York, and I am a home teacher, and I'm retired, and I pay my medical, not New York. The bottom line is this: how did you ever bond for improvements in a 100-year-old place, a new police station, improvements at a fire hall, and let our children go to a school that was built in 1972 that has all these problems? How did you let that happen? That endangers our children and our faculty.
well, at the time that building project began 9 years ago, no, actually it didn't. The electrical heating was converted to oil and gas some years ago. The building has very definite needs, big needs. It was there'll be a report coming out. Actually, there is a report on the website right now that was done by 2 Wentworth graduates. As part of their project, they went through the building and they made a whole list of things that need improvement. When you look at a new building, when we built the high school, it was $48 million. The state paid 72%. We paid the difference. When we build a new middle school, if all the numbers align correctly, we'll wind up getting 50% from the state. But that cost is going to be somewhere between 50 and $70 million. And it's something we're going to have to really work on planning out.
I'm 72 years old. The middle school that I went to in 1950 is still operating.
I don't want you to think that this place is ready to fall apart. It's not. It's not because of its age and because of the way it was designed. It's not the teaching environment that we set as a standard today. That's the difference. There are other conditions. It's possible we can do a renovation, but the likelihood is new construction is cheaper than renovations on buildings that are 50 years old. So we have to look at it. Now, the one thing you forgot to mention is in Long Island, they have a separate school tax. They bill their own tax. So we can't do that here. Any other questions? Ma'am. Thank you for that rousing support, Mary. Why? Because the debt, is basically misplaced. Right now, because we don't have a debt exclusion, we are committing money that should be going to capital to operations. So there are, I want to say 9 or 10 articles on the annual town meeting for capital needs at the school that can't be touched because we don't have a capital fund. By doing the debt exclusion, we take that debt out of the levy and it becomes available for capital needs. That is a separate and distinct process from the operating revenue. And the Prop 2.5 override, if it passes, is going to have 2 components. Part of that money is going to be committed to ongoing capital needs, and every year, the town will have to discipline itself to take a portion of that money and appropriate it to capital stabilization, because once it's in the levy, it's available for appropriation. So a portion of that money, and we haven't talked specifics, so I don't really want to get into them right now, but probably something less than a third of that is going to go into operating expenses. And I would say more heavily weighted to the schools than anywhere else. But again, we haven't established that. That's part of the plan that we have to develop to show you why we should be able to get that money, because we have to be good stewards of that money. Yeah. I would like to do it right now, but I just from the discussions I've had around town with a number of people, I do not believe that if we put an override on the May 18th ballot, that it would pass. I think more people would vote no than yes. And they'd vote no because they're not comfortable with what we're doing with it and where it's going and whether or not we really need it. I mean, there are people out there that they're the same people that throw a buck in the collection plate at church. Hey, this is all the money we should be spending. I don't like paying taxes. Back when I bought this house, I only paid $971,000. Yeah, that was 33 years ago. Things have changed. But that attitude is sometimes out there. So I think that we need to build a case, a compelling case, for why we need that override. So that anyone who looks at it says, yeah, how could you say no? It just makes sense. We're not there yet.
No, I agree with the saying, because how can you do that in the fall when the teachers will be gone? You may not get them back. Yeah, and the thing is, by the way, it should be a choice for the town. My daughter lives in Hanson. Someone said Hanson will never pick it over. Pack this place with parents and tell them, guess what?
It doesn't matter if you pack them here, Mary. It's in the voting booth that the decision is made, where there's nobody but you and your conscience. I need to move on.
So busy, they work 2 jobs. Look at who's here. A lot of older people who are
Sir. Correct.
Overrides don't pass the majority of time. In one of my past lives, we put an override and a debt exclusion on the same ballot.
They both failed. Sure.
Chances of getting a debt exclusion are much more than it is if you put both of them on.
While I didn't make the decision, it was my position and my advocacy that we not put both on the ballot because I am fairly convinced that the reaction would be very negative and they both go down. If we can do this in phases and show people that we're doing it right, I think we'll get the support we earn. Sir.
I'm the youngest one also here, and I graduated from Enhance in 2013. And then me hearing about like how you guys are already wanting to like give out pink slips and that's not cool. Because all the teachers there that was there that I went to, probably not there anymore. So even though that they're not there, even though that you guys are giving out the pink slips, who knows, they're not doing the right things, but the students confide to them. Some students may go to them and ask them for help, this and that. We don't know, but if you give it, if they're not there for later on, why? Like, I understand, like, I'm listening, I don't know, like, half the words that you guys are here, but I'm here because I might be here when you guys are all gone. Because this is my generation that's gonna be.
You likely will be. And that's the point I'm trying to make.
I'm trying to make a difference because I've been here, I've been coming here since I've been able to go, trying to make a difference.
Sure.
I'm trying to show that my peers that, oh, we can go have voice, we don't have to stop now. Because look around, I'm here, I have my school sweater. It has my high school on it. I'm trying to listen, educate my friends later on when I go home, on Facebook, wherever it may be.
The need for our younger people to get involved has never been greater. Unfortunately, apathy reigns supreme. Any other questions, comments? Yes, Cindy. We bid every year, or every contract term. We bid 5 years ago, and then we bid, was it last year, Bruce, for the extension? And while you may think that's expensive, yep. Well, do they have transfer stations? That's the difference. We have curbside. Well, I can tell you that the trash fee that we have today pays for the cost to have Waste Management operate a weekly trash collection and a weekly recycling. Those terms, those contracts are typically long-term. You may see a few communities out there that are still paying under $60 a ton. We've been on the wrong side of that for at least 9 years. And what's changed is 6 years ago, we were making money on recycling. 3 years ago, we weren't paying for it. This year, we're paying almost as much for recycling as we are for trash. It's a problem worldwide. And the only option that I can offer people, if you can get a better deal from a hauler, you're not obligated to use the town trash system. You can always go to Troop or one of the other companies and say, hey, what will you charge me to pick up my trash? Say again? What is our current term? Do you know? We're in 5 years? Okay. There were times when we signed 10 and 20-year contracts. And those actually work to our advantage, but they don't anymore. Any other questions, comments? I want to thank you all for taking the time to be here. The intent of this meeting was simply to bring out the information that we're going to be working on when we meet to do our annual town meeting. So I encourage everyone to come to the meeting, encourage your friends and neighbors to participate. You get to make the decisions, but only if you're in this room. And all the information is on the web. Thank you.